Morning, all. All right, so we have 11 games tonight in the National Hockey League, and for a short stretch, there's going to be 10 games on at the same time. We have 6 games starting at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and then there'll be a game added every half hour until 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, and then we've got the 7:30 Pacific start in San Jose, because that's how things go, and we'll see if that one goes to extra time. All right, 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, the Minnesota Wild in against the Boston Bruins. This is the first of two meetings. They'll meet again on Saturday, so December 23rd. Minnesota's 12, 13, and 4 overall. Over their last 10 games, they're 7 and 3. And John Hines coming off a loss last night. Let's see how he changes things up tonight. Looking at scoring by period, and I went over the charts over and over and over again just to try to make sure I'm not making any mistakes here. But by my count, Minnesota, good in the second period, scoring 28, allowing 23. Every other period outside of that, they allow more than they score. So they're -5 in the first period, -5 in the third period, and they've allowed 2 goals in the overtime. They're scoring 2.97 goals per game. They're allowing 3.21 goals against per game. Those numbers are getting better since the coaching change, but there's still some work to do. Boston's 5-3-2 in their last 10 to get to their 19-5-5 record. And Boston needs to play better than they've been playing recently. Their scoring is quite good through the first period, 27-14. Third period, things are close, 33-32. And in overtime, they've allowed 5. They've scored twice. 3.17 goals scored per game, 2.52 goals against per game. I do think that they get overrated a little bit by some because of how well they started the season. And we'll see how things go from here. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific start between Columbus and Buffalo. So this is the first of 3 meetings between these two teams. They'll meet again December 30th and February 23rd. For Columbus, they're 10, 17, and 5 overall. They're 4, 5, and 1 in their last 10. The first period's honestly been good to them. 34 goals, 27 against. Second period, 33 goals scored, 20 against. It's the third period. They score 27 and allow 55. I did a double take on that one myself. Scoring 2 in overtime and allowing 4. So they're scoring 3 goals per game even. They're allowing 3.63 goals against per game. On the Buffalo side, they're 13, 16, and 3 overall. They're 3, 6, and 1 over their last 10. The first period is where Buffalo hurts. They've allowed 39. They've scored 21. Outside of that, their scoring numbers aren't bad. They're scoring 2.81 goals per game. They're allowing 3.25. So they have to get better in the first period is really the storyline for the Buffalo Sabres. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific start between Vegas and Carolina. For Vegas, they're 21, 6, and 5 overall. They're 7, 1, and 2 in their last 10 games. For scoring, they're good in every period. In overtime, they've scored twice. They've allowed 4, but honestly, outside of that, closest you get this period maybe to be concerned with is they're only a +4 in the first period. 27 goals scored, 23 goals against. On the Carolina side, they're 16, 12, and 5 overall. They're 3, 4, and 3 in their last 10, but it does feel like things are on the verge of turning around. Their best period is actually the third period where they're a +3, 35 goals scored, 32 goals against. But overall, the number's not fantastic. They're scoring 3.19 goals per game and allowing 3.19 goals per game. They either need to score a bunch more or allow a lot less, or maybe a combination of both. But the 3, 4, and 3 record over their last 10, that's not a very Carolina-like number. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific start between Philadelphia and the New Jersey Devils. This should be a great one. November 30th, it was a 4-3 overtime win for New Jersey. These teams will meet again on February 17th and April the 13th. For Philadelphia, they're 17, 10, and 3 overall. They're 7, 1, and 2 in their last 10. And the scoring is a positive for them in every period except overtime, where they've allowed 3 and they've scored 2. But again, if you're a Philly fan, that has to feel pretty good. They're pretty consistent. 2.9 goals scored per game. They're allowing 2.63 goals against per game. As long as they stay in that range with goals against, they have a good chance of being a good team, a good enough team to make the playoffs, and then potentially do something in the playoffs as well if those defensive numbers hold. New Jersey, 16, 12, and 1 overall. They're 7 and 3 in their last 10. They're coming off of a loss in their last game against Anaheim. They're allowing more than they score, is basically the problem with New Jersey, and there doesn't seem to be a period where it's a lot different. Second period, they've scored 32. They've allowed 31. In the overtime, they've scored 3 times. They haven't allowed a goal in the overtime. So they're scoring 3.48 goals per game. They're allowing 3.55 goals against per game. But New Jersey's numbers are trending in the right direction, so look for a bunch of positives there I would say 2-3 weeks from now, those numbers should all be positive if New Jersey keeps playing the way they've been playing. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific start between St. Louis and Tampa. So I'm taking Tampa tonight. November 14th, St. Louis won this matchup 5-0 in St. Louis. So I figure Tampa Bay should bounce back at home. St. Louis is 15-14-1 overall. They're 4-6 in their last 10. I believe they're 2-0 under the new coach. However, their scoring, there's been problems. They're a negative in each period except for the overtime where they've scored twice. They haven't allowed a goal. Outside of that, you've got the third period where they've scored 26, allowed 27. They're scoring 2.9 goals per game. They're allowing 3.27 goals against per game. For Tampa Bay, they're 4-6 in their last 10, 14-13-5 overall. And the period they've had the most trouble with, really the second period, they've allowed 35. They've scored 27. They're also a negative in the third period and the overtime. First period, 38 goals scored, 32 goals against. But overall, 3.28 goals scored per game, and they're allowing 3.56 goals against per game. Tampa Bay has to bring those goals against down. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific start between the Rangers and Toronto. There were a lot of Rangers fans mad that they dropped in the power rankings, or at least they felt like they could have been number one, and they didn't seem to be talking about the Toronto game. Last week, Toronto went into New York and beat them 7-3 and made it look relatively easy. The third and final meeting between these teams will be on March the 2nd. So for the Rangers, they're 21-7-1 overall. They're 6-4 in their last 10. So for the Rangers, it's definitely been a bit more of a bumpy ride over the last couple of weeks. Their scoring is solid in each period. They're positive in each period. They're scoring 3.28 goals per game. They're allowing 2.72 goals per game. On the Toronto side, they're 6-1-3 in their last 10. They're 16-6-6 overall. So if number of the beast isn't their goal song tonight, I don't even know what we're doing here. But yeah, so they're a negative in the first period. They've allowed 31. They've scored 27. So Toronto, did they start on time? That number would tell you that's something they need to work on. But the rest of the way, they're pretty solid. The overtime, they've allowed 5 goals. They've scored 3, but it's the 3-on-3 overtime. 3.64 goals scored per game. They're allowing 3.18 goals against per game. 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific start between the Edmonton Oilers and the New York Islanders. On November 13th, Edmonton won this matchup at home, 4-1. If I wasn't wearing Tampa, I'd probably be wearing the Islanders jersey instead. For the Oilers, they're 13-14-1. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and their scoring's positive in the first period, and then it goes negative in the second and third period. Third period being their toughest period, which doesn't seem very Oilers-like. So they're scoring 3.43 goals per game. They're allowing 3.46 goals against per game. On the Islanders side, they're 14-8-8 overall. They're 6-2-2 in their last 10. A positive in the first period, 27 goals, 16 goals allowed. The 16 goals allowed in the first period is just insane. So that's been the best period for the Islanders not allowing goals, and it's been the best period for the Oilers scoring goals. So look for what the score looks like after the first, and it might give you a good idea who's going to win. For the Islanders, they're scoring 3.1 goals per game. They're allowing 3.23 goals against per game. So they're in the negative when it comes to goal differential as well. So both of these teams with a negative goal differential, both looking for better numbers overall, and both with positive records in their last 10 games. Should be a fun one. 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. The Vancouver-Nashville season series wraps up. Vancouver's won both games. So to me, that means Nashville probably wins tonight. So for Vancouver, they're 21-9-2 on the season. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. But yeah, sweeping a season series is not easy, and Nashville's playing really well. For Vancouver, each period's been pretty good, although in the first period they've scored 35, they've allowed 28. So that's as close to an even number as you get. It's been positive the rest of the way. They're scoring 3.75 goals per game, allowing 2.44 goals per game, and 46 goals in the second period for Vancouver. That's pretty good. Nashville, 18-13 overall. They're 7-3 in their last 10, and it's almost like the first period team is where you get your lead. 36 goals scored, 25 goals against, and if they're leading after the first, they've got a very good chance. But the second and third period, a bit of an issue for the team. They've allowed 29 goals in the third. They've scored 20. So the really telling part for Nashville could be how that second period goes. Vancouver's explosive in the second period. Nashville's allowed 40 goals in the second period. They've also scored 38. Could be crazy. For Nashville, they're scoring 3.16 goals per game. They're allowing 3.03 goals against per game. And yeah, that should be a fun one. 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. See, like I said, every half hour. Colorado and the Chicago Blackhawks. So this is the second of 4 meetings on October 19th. Colorado won 4-0. These teams will meet February 29th as well as March the 4th. For Colorado, they're 19-10-2 on the season, but they're 4-4-2 in their last 10. So it's been a bit of a struggle recently. For Colorado, the second period's been a struggle. They're -3 in the second period. Third period's been great, scoring 44 and allowing 28. They haven't scored in the overtime. They've allowed 1 in the overtime. They've scored 3.61 goals per game thus far. They're allowing 3.06. On the Chicago side, they're 9-20-1. They're 2-7-1 in their last 10 games. Scoring and allowing goals, well, Chicago is the closest to even when it comes to the first and third period. Actually, in the overtime, they've scored twice. They haven't allowed any, but again, that's 3-on-3 overtime. They're -11 in both the first and third periods. The long change, they're a -20. So the second period's a bit more of a problem, which is interesting because for Colorado, they're a -3 in the second period. So for Chicago, 2.33 goals scored per game. They're allowing 3.6 goals against per game. So those numbers just translate to a team with a 9-20-1 record. And then at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, again a half an hour later, the Ottawa Senators and the Arizona Coyotes get things started. This is the first of 2 meetings. They'll meet again in Ottawa on March the 1st. Does Ottawa get the coaching bump? New coach behind the bench. Does it help? They're 11-15 overall. They're 3-7 in their last 10. Their playoff hopes, already a bit of a problem here, but the first period, not as much. They're scoring 30 goals and allowing 23. And honestly, in the third period, they're very good as well. It's the second period where the Ottawa Senators have a problem, allowing 44 goals and scoring 28. They're scoring 3.35 goals per game on average. They're allowing 4.42 at the other end, so that's something that needs to get better. On the Arizona side, they're 15-13-2 overall. They're 6-4 in their last 10. The first period's been good for them as well. The second period, pretty good. The third period, they have a -7 there. In the overtime, they've scored once. They've allowed twice, but they're scoring 3.03 goals per game. They're allowing 2.87 goals against per game. So, again, for the Coyotes, it's not a bad picture right now at all, which has to feel weird at this point in the season for Coyotes fans. And finally, at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific, the LA Kings and the San Jose Sharks meet for the first of 4 times. December 27th, January 22nd, and April the 4th, the other times these teams will meet. So for LA, they're 17-6-4 overall. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. Scoring-wise, a +6 in the second period is as close as you get to kind of a mediocre number, outside of the overtime where they've scored once and allowed twice. 3.56 goals scored per game and allowing 2.41 goals against per game. On the San Jose side, they're 9-19-3, but they're 5-4-1 in their last 10, so they've been better lately, although they've lost their last 2, so that's how the numbers work. For San Jose, the third period, they've scored the most goals with 26, but they've also allowed the most goals with 46. They've scored twice in the overtime. They haven't allowed 1 in the overtime. 2.13 goals scored per game, which doesn't sound good, but remember, it was a 1 to start the season. They were a 1 through 9 games. 3.90 goals against per game. So let me know your winners in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video or just because you feel like it. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.